For more on the peace negotiations, we are joined now by Israel's ambassador to the United States, Dr. Michael Leiter. Good morning. Welcome back to the program.
Good morning, Margaret. Good to be with you.
Israel and the U.S. have been lockstep in this war to date. You heard the vice president sort of leave the door open to diplomacy, but President Trump also said this morning the U.S. is locked and loaded for an appropriate moment. Is it your understanding that Israel and the U.S. will hold fire until the end of this two-week ceasefire?
We have to remember that the president has been relentless in pursuing an end to this crisis through talks. The talks preceded the June war. Talks preceded Epic Fury. The talks are going on now. And I think that if we can conclude this crisis with Iran, with this regime, this tyrannical regime that's pursuing nuclear weapons, without going back into kinetic activity, it would probably be best for everyone. The president continues to pursue that. But right now, they saw face to face. The vice president sat opposite this fellow Galibaf, who's directly responsible for the murder of his own people just in January, this past January, and just saw how obdurate and obstinate they are in pursuit of nuclear weapons.
When you said the talks are still going on, is there any level of U.S.-Iran contact at this point?
Well, you know, the president gave the issue 2 weeks, and we're just into the end of the first week. So there is another week left for the potential for continued talks. Okay. We know the Iranians. We know this regime. We don't think they're going anywhere, but it's important to give it a chance.
Vance said we need to see Iran give affirmative commitment to not seek a nuclear weapon or the tools that would enable them to quickly achieve a nuclear weapon. Is your understanding that the U.S. position is zero enrichment, or are they still leaving the door open that Iran could have a civilian nuclear program for medical purposes?
Civilian nuclear program doesn't entail enrichment. There are 57 countries with a civilian nuclear program that don't have enrichment.
But they want a little bit. You know that.
No, if they have a little bit, then they can have a lot. To move from 60%, which they had, to 90%. Look, you don't build these production plants deep underground if you're doing it for medical purposes. You have nothing to hide. These people lie. We shouldn't be surprised when people who murder their own also lie. This has been their pursuit. They've been chanting for 47 years, death to America, death to Israel. Right. That's their goal. Let's not be
But we're negotiating
with
that same regime right now.
We're trying at the same time to add, we're negotiating them after eliminating their Navy, after eliminating their Air Force, after degrading their leadership. Hopefully, they'll come to their knees and say, we're surrendering.
Well, the president has said the war is won. Your prime minister said the work is not yet complete. Specifically, what part of Iran still poses a military threat to Israel? Do you still consider it an existential threat?
Well, there are three things that we have to be concerned with from the beginning. Number one, the pursuit of a nuclear weapon. If they go back to that pursuit, that concerns us.
They say
Number two, ballistic missiles. Okay, these ballistic missiles, they promised, by the way, that they don't have a ballistic missile that could reach Europe. They lied. We saw that they do.
You're talking about the firing on Diego Garcia.
The firing on Diego Garcia. They said it was limited to 2,000 kilometers. We see now they've got 4,000 kilometers. It's just a sprint to 8,000 kilometers and to hit Chicago or Tenafly, New Jersey. So that has to be dealt with.
U.S. intel says 9 years.
And proxy. Well, our intel says less than 9 years. Okay?
Yeah.
And our intel has been accurate on this from the very beginning. Okay? Now it was clear. We said that they're in a sprint to achieve nuclear weapons. And Mr. Witkoff came back from the talks beforehand and said they came in, they walked into negotiations and said, we've got 60% ready for 11 bombs. Yeah. 11 bombs at 60% means that you got a week or two till you got 90% and weapon grade. And the last thing, Margaret, are the proxies. Okay? This isn't over until there is a complete delinkage between Iran and its proxies, which have spread death, mayhem, and destruction around the Middle East.
I want to come back to that in regard to Hezbollah. But just to finish what you're talking about with intelligence, there was this highly detailed New York Times report this past week. I know you read it. Extraordinary journalism that detailed this February 11th meeting where your prime minister pitched President Trump on bombing Iran. It said the Israeli plan was to kill the Ayatollah, done, cripple Iran's ability to threaten its neighbors, spur a popular uprising in Iran, and then conduct regime change, leaving in place a secular leader. Obviously, all those goals were not achieved. Can you declare an end to the war without achieving that checklist?
First of all of those goals have not been achieved yet. This is a process. This isn't instant soup, number one. Number two, I was in the room at that meeting. The journalists who wrote that article were not. And apparently they received the information second, third hand. There's an awful lot in that article which simply isn't true, which is a narrative that's being created. Interesting narrative, but not accurate. So I'd be very careful about quoting from that particular article.
Well, specifically, what did they get wrong? Because they say your intelligence services, the Mossad, argued the Iranian regime would be so weak it could not choke off the Strait of Hormuz. That was wrong. Iran would have the minimal...
No, we didn't argue that. We argued the potential, that we've got to work towards that. Nothing was presented as a fact, that if we do this, this will be the outcome. It's not science. Politics is not science. Military operations are not science. We presented the case that this is what we think should be done. The president makes a decision. This whole thing about the prime minister coming in and dragging the president into this, it's all, you know, for publicity purposes.
Did Mossad believe that there would be protests that would overthrow the regime and that Kurdish fighters would enter through the north?
The Mossad thought that, as we saw in January, hundreds of thousands and millions of people rise up. The potential for that happening again is even greater now. And we still think it's very great. We still think that could materialize over the next couple of months.
Then why
but there's
negotiate
no guarantee
with the same regime that is suppressing those people?
Well, you can negotiate.
Is Israel really supportive of this diplomacy?
We're supportive of the president and his efforts. Okay, we've been in lockstep from the beginning, in the planning, in the implementation, and we're going to end this thing together as well. So we're completely supportive of the president's efforts, both diplomatically and militarily.
On the proxies, the Jerusalem Post today is writing that Israel's war in Lebanon is the price to pay for Iran reopening Hormuz. The Israeli offensive against Hezbollah, and for our viewers, they are a political party in Lebanon. They also are Iran's strongest militia and proxy force. They've complicated things here. The Trump administration is holding talks Tuesday in Washington. You'll be at the table with the ambassador from Lebanon. Hezbollah is not part of these talks. In that lead up, is Israel going to pause, reduce the strikes on Lebanon?
If I can, a point of correction. Hezbollah is a terrorist organization, which is also a political party. It's not a political party which also has a terrorist wing. They are a terrorist organization. They're a proxy of Iran, which has an agenda of destroying the state of Israel. And they fire missiles into our towns and villages. And we have to respond. Now, we want to negotiate with Lebanon. Lebanon and Israel can live in peace tomorrow. I believe, you know, we had this initial phone call on Friday. It was a conference call between myself, Lebanese ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to Beirut, all moderated by the State Department official, Mike Needham. It was a great conversation. And the thing we all agreed upon, that if we just put Hezbollah on the side and just Israel and Lebanon negotiate peace, 2 months, 3 months, we've got a complete peace agreement.
But let me just follow up. You said Israel has to respond. That's different when it comes to responding to a strike from Hezbollah versus the kind of bombing that we saw this past week, particularly on Wednesday. The airstrikes killed more than 350 people that day, a third of them women and children and the elderly, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry. The vice president said Israel had agreed to check itself with these strikes, and the president said he spoke with Bibi, your prime minister, and he said he's going to low-key it. Can you explain what low-key bombing means? Is this a reduced cadence and volume of strikes from Wednesday? What exactly did the U.S. and Israel agree to?
Reduced cadence, up cadence. Operational issues aren't discussed on Sunday morning on television. What we discussed is that we're going to be in tandem with the president's efforts in the Gulf, and we support the president's efforts. Right now, we are pursuing those who are shooting missiles against our civilians. And the Operation Wednesday was targeted against operation centers of Hezbollah. Now, what they do...
You dispute those Lebanese government figures of civilian
of course.
deaths?
It's like Hamas releasing figures from Gaza, you know, their health ministry.
You're negotiating with the Lebanese government.
Absolutely, absolutely. But sometimes there's this attempt to paint us as, you know, going after civilians. We're going after, in a targeted fashion, the terrorist infrastructure. That's what we focus on. Now, what they do, Margaret, is they put their operation centers, their terrorist centers, among civilians. Now, we tell them to get out. They don't always get out, but we do what we can. Hamas does this in Gaza by building their bases within civilian centers. Hezbollah does it, and we saw the other day where Tehran sent their civilians out to the bridges and the energy plans, so they wouldn't be. This is a crime against humanity.
Well, you have your own diplomacy on Tuesday. We will be watching for that and what happens. Thank you for your time this morning.